And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I'll go through the preliminaries a little bit later because I want to jump right into our conversation today. Today's subject, it can be codified down into one word: legacy. What will they say about you when you are gone? And that's basically creating a life of legacy. Our guest, and I have to tell my guest that he is one of my favorite people. I have had some of the most incredible conversations, most enlightening for me, from rabbis. And Rabbi Daniel Cohen, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me today. I appreciate it.
I'll tell you that I only know smatterings of the level of study and education that you go through. And yet it's ongoing. It's just because you become a rabbi doesn't mean, okay, I know it all now.
Not at all, by the way. One of my key teachers said to me, once you become a rabbi, it's your license to start studying.
Exactly.
It's a lifelong journey, lifelong.
I will tell you that it's frustrating for many because there are things that have been shared with me in regards to my own personal faith as a kid growing up Roman Catholic, introduced then at the age of 23 to the Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church, and learning so much about that aspect. But then as I got older and older, I began to hear more and more and learn more and more about the Jewish faith, the Aleph Bet and the 22 letters, and each letter has its own legend and so forth. And it's just incredible how that builds and builds and builds. And if only we had been taught these kinds of things, including Hebrew, it would have been great because we would have understood, I think, a whole lot more. What we're going to understand today is this aspect of legacy, and we talk about it pretty regularly here on this program. You obviously have a legacy of your own as a rabbi because of the people that you come in contact with, at the temple or even just on the street and so forth, because of the course that your life has taken. Let's start there in terms of your life of legacy. When did you decide that it was time to pursue this particular, do I want to call it a vocation? I don't think it's correct to call it a career.
I wouldn't even
Maybe
call it a vocation.
A life.
Yeah, I would also think about it as a calling, and I'll put it in this framework that, God asks a question to humanity at the very beginning of time. After Adam and Eve, sin in the Garden of Eden, God says to them, "Where are you?" Ayeka is a Hebrew, "Where are you?" And everybody understands that, of course, God knew where Adam and Eve were, but it was a reflective call for Adam and Eve to ask themselves, "Where are you? Is this the real you? What do you want out of life? What really do you want to accomplish?" And that notion of being aware that every day God is calling on all of us to be the best version of ourselves, to ensure that we're not pursuing counterfeit pleasures, but real meaning, to not take every day for granted, but lead life with a sense of appreciation, is something that we all have inside of us. The question is, which I think you're asking, is when did I decide that I wanted to more intentionally tap into that frequency and that calling? So number one, I credit my parents. Growing up, it's not that I was born and my parents said, "You're going to be a rabbi." I mean, I had no idea. But I would say that both my mother of blessed memory and my father are very grateful people. I always felt that, no matter what was going on, you'd ask my mother how she was doing. She'd say, "Thank God, fantastic." There was a sense that, we had to be grateful every day. My father would always say to me, when I was I would say, getting a little bit lost in pursuing things that weren't that important, he would say to me, "Remember who you are. What are you here for?" I remember having a call with him when I was in college in my first year, and I was thinking of going into, doing something in film or like arts. And he said, "What are you doing? Like, what's your purpose here? Do you really want to spend all your time on that?" But then, unfortunately, I had a tragic incident in my life that really, of course, deepen the sense that I wanted to lead a life of legacy was the sudden passing of my mother. I grew up in Atlanta. I'm the oldest of six children. My mom was 44 years old, and I was visiting my mom's parents without a care in the world. And I got a phone call that she had a brain aneurysm. And within 24 hours, she had a second brain aneurysm.
Mm.
She went into a coma, and then she passed away. And my entire life was turned upside down. And I realized that then, very intimately and tragically, that life can change in an instant. We think that everything is going to remain the same, but we don't know that, and life is fleeting. And then the real pivot moment for me is when I was in my early 20s when my mom passed away. But then when I got to the same age as my mother, which was 44, I began to reflect on, am I doing the most that I can with the life that God has given me to help make this world a better place? And it was really in that year that I really began to think more deeply about not only could I lead a life of legacy, but how do I inspire others to do it? And the other piece of this is in the rabbinate. There are people, for example, that I'll never see in synagogue. But maybe somebody's sick, and they'll call me up and say, "Rabbi, pray for me." And then because they have that brush with mortality, and then I may not hear from them again. It's not because, God forbid, somebody died, but now they don't feel that sense that life is fragile. So I asked myself, how can I help people? And this is the concept behind the book. Identify the best version of yourself while you're healthy, and then reverse engineer your life with 7 principles to lead the life now for how you want to be remembered. And that's really been my calling and mission, for the past 7-8 years in a very intentional way.
Wow. Well, you and I share some commonalities. I am also one of 6 in my parents' lineage,
Oh, wow.
if you will. I am not the oldest. I am the oldest male, and I was named after my father, but it didn't dawn on me until I stood before a crowd, a small crowd, at my father's memorial 2 months ago.
Wow.
And I had a written piece of paper with all of my remarks on it that I was going to make. I mean, literally word for word. And as I'm walking up there, I thought, you need to introduce yourself. You need to let them know that your father had an impact in your life. And so when I went up there, I said, I am Richard Les Dugan. And my father's name was Les Richard Dugan.
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks that, wow, he really had. And this was one of the frustrations he had, was that he didn't feel that really he made a difference in our lives. He would give my mother all of the credit for raising us. Now, yes, my mother deserves a huge amount of credit, but the theme of the memorial, and this was not something that was done beforehand, was, Dad, we would not be the people we are today if it hadn't been for you. Now, I know that he knows that today, but he didn't believe it then, but when he was here in this world. Is your father still alive?
Yeah, thank God. My dad is just celebrated his 80th birthday.
Oh, wow.
After my mom passed away, a couple years later, he remarried a very nice woman. But he, thank God, is very well and enjoying the bounty of, thank God, good health and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I have found fascinating, too. Back when I was a youngster, we had 4 generations living. My great-grandmother on my mother's side, and of course, my grandmother, my mother, my sisters. And then my great-grandmother passed, and we were, of course, back down to 3. And then my eldest sister, who has also since passed, she went before my father. And I think that's one reason why my father, he just didn't want to be here anymore. And he left a year later. But she had a daughter who then had 2 children. So now my mother is a great-grandmother, as my father was a great-grandfather. I became a
Yeah.
great uncle. It was just like, wow, we're back to 4 generations. I don't know why that makes a big deal to me, but obviously I'm
But
concerned about that.
yeah, well, I would say, you're raising a very important point because we all want to touch eternity in some way. That's just who we are. We want to feel
Mhm.
that we've made a difference.
Yeah.
And when we have multiple generations that we know will outlast us, but will embody the values that were important to us, we feel that we become eternal. And that's ultimately what we're here to move the world forward in a positive place. And it gives us deeper pleasure that we can ever imagine possible than any good hamburger can do, any trip. I mean, it's deep. It touches the soul. It touches the
Yes.
soul.
Yes. Rabbi Daniel Cohen is my guest. What will they say about you when you're gone? Can you answer that question for me, folks? I hope that you can as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a genuine pleasure as I constantly say this, especially when I get folks such as yourself, a rabbi, on my program, because I get to tap into some great knowledge. Um, but there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I know that
Yeah.
as you shared with us at the beginning about Adam and Eve and God saying, "Where are you?" What struck me was it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't because he didn't know where God didn't know where they were. It
Right.
was a question directed to them where they were. Now that you've done this that I asked you not to do, now where are you? Now what are you
Right.
going to do? Now who are you? And so on and so forth. It was half rhetorical, I think, in one sense, but also asking them, just like I think God asks each one of us, where am I? Where am I now? Where am I in my life? Not so much,
Yeah.
100,000 steps down the path. No, that's not. It's not geography here. It's more philosophical, I guess.
It's
Right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And for me, one of the things that I reflect on a lot, and it's something that King David speaks about in the book of Psalms. King David had this unique ability to recognize, as it says in Psalm 16, that God is in front of him always, that he was focused on his spiritual legacy, his purpose. And the very last words of Psalms are very instructive, and I think something that we can all appreciate. And I hearken back before I share those words to a story at the height of COVID. There was a man who was 94 years old in Italy who had to be put on a ventilator. And thank God he survived. And on his way out of the hospital, he was given the bill for a ventilator for one day. And he began to cry. And the doctor turned to him and said, "Are you crying because you can't pay the bill for a ventilator?" He said, "I'm crying because I've been breathing God's air for free for 94 years. And now I know how much one day's breath is worth."
Oh,
King
wow.
David says, yeah, King David says at the end of Psalms, "I thank you, God, for every breath that I take." During COVID, people weren't able to do that. And I truly believe that every moment God is investing in me, his love, his belief, and then I am empowered and invested with that gift to try to spread God's light in the world. And we live in a world where people are moving so fast, they're not conscious of the gift of every breath. And to me, that's kind of where the core thing is, that be aware that we matter, be aware that the world needs us, and that we have something unique to give that nobody else in the universe can give, and that will enrich our life and sense of purpose every single day.
My mother shared with us children, and I've shared this on the program before, but she did it individually. She shared with each one of us. She would say to us, "You are unique and you are special." And there was a point in time when we got together as kids and we said, "Oh, yeah, Mom said that I was unique." Well, Mom said I was unique too. At first, the observation from my perspective was, well, shoot, she said it to each one of us. That kind of diminishes what she said until I thought about it, until I thought about it long and hard. And it's like, no, wait a minute. No, It doesn't diminish it. It actually makes it that much more profound that each one of us, the six of us in particular, were unique. Do you feel that somehow in our society, this is, I think, really truly part of what we may or may not leave as a legacy in this world? You think that that's part of the issue that we're dealing with, that people, they have not realized, and it hasn't been enforced, whether it be in family or church or school or wherever, that they are unique, that they are special. And we're not talking about egotism. We're not talking about narcissism here. We're talking about a healthy understanding and a healthy, appropriate pride in who you are, not what you do. It's kind of what you said earlier. And for example, your legacy, do you want to be remembered as Rabbi Daniel Cohen, or do you want to be just remembered as Daniel Cohen? What a nice guy. He gave of himself. He did this and that, blah, 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 blah. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, first of all, I know what they're going to say about you. I mean, you are a nice guy. I can tell, a thoughtful guy.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I know you weren't soliciting that, but it's the truth. Um, I think that one of the obstacles that people have is that in this world, we are bombarded by messages that our happiness and success is defined by emulating others. You will, like, you look on the TV, you look at, notice, everybody is trying to receive accolades and fit into a particular model of what other people see as success. The definition of real happiness and success, which isn't always conveyed, is that are we realizing the divine potential for which God put us in the world? And God is not looking for us to do the same thing, because we all imagine, the way I like to look at it is, we all play a different instrument in a divine symphony to bring God's light in the world. And if somebody may be a drummer, somebody may play a trumpet, somebody may be violin, but we all need to play our own instruments to this huge heavenly score, which is to recognize God's divinity in every human being and to anticipate opportunities for kindness. And then we're going to make some wonderful music. And, in Jewish theology, one of the obstacles is that people think too little of themselves and say, the world is nuts. What am I going to do? And I always tell people that God is not asking us to change the world, but God is asking us to change the world of one person every day, to find my corner of the universe that could use a little more hope in place of despair and healing in place of brokenness. And that's the way the world will move forward. And that's the way I'll make a difference. And one light that I can shine in this corner, God will take that light and hopefully bring a tremendous amount of light from it. So I do think that when it comes to legacy, people underestimate what that means. It doesn't mean that I have to, be this great leader of a company or be whatever. It's in your little world. Are you ensuring that anybody that leaves your orbit is feeling better about themselves than when they entered your orbit? And then you will create a legacy that will be eternal.
Hmm. One of the things that I like about what I do here is the fact that, as far as, for example, YouTube, I'm not paying any premium, so everything that I put up there is going to be up there in perpetuity. Unfortunately, the SoundCloud aspect of it, I do pay for that, and the day that I stop paying for that, it'll be cut down to, I don't know what the size is, but nonetheless, I do it anyway, and it's important to me. And you talk about that phrase, changing the world. When I was a kid growing up, we were told, don't think about changing the world. It's just too big. It's too big a bite to take, right? And maybe from the standpoint of a child. But here I am, 63 years old, and I want to change the world. Now, I'm going to do it in little bites. I'm not going to try to, go out there and become something that I'm not. I made the mistake of talking with a politician once and saying that I would never get into politics because I have too much integrity. And Then it was shortly thereafter that I learned that he was a member of the city council. And I'm going, oops.
Yeah.
But I'll do my little part where I'm at. And just as you are doing your part. And you are Rabbi Daniel Cohen. And my guest has written a fascinating book. I think that it's very interesting to read through this. We're going to get into some more of this as we continue talking about what will they say about you when you are gone here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and my very special guest, Rabbi Daniel Cohen, is here with us to discuss many aspects of legacy as we continue here. One of the elements I'd like to talk about that I find interesting, especially because of the group of a certain segment of our, specifically American, United U.S. Society, that is a group of people that claim to have a particular faith, and yet they have this perspective of almost. Wanting to change the world, but using, I can't think of any other word to use other than somewhat violent means. That happened, of course, at one level on January 6th of 2021. Very, very sad day. You thought 9/11 was bad, but I got to tell you, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And it was not a tour group. I'm sorry, it was not a tour group, but why the world needs more faith and not less, in the sense that in the New Testament, it talks. I think it was when he was talking. Jesus was talking a Sermon on the Mount, and he was saying, "Look, you're concerned about where your next meal is coming from, and what you're going to wear, where you're going to lay your head tonight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see that bird up in the tree?" And I'm paraphrasing, folks. Okay, I'm not King Jimmy. Do you see that bird up in the tree? It doesn't toil. All right. It does its thing. It lives its natural life. And guess what? It's taken care of. You are one of God's children. How much more will God take care of you? And that's philosophy I have lived by for many years. That's how my wife and I wound up here in Santa Barbara. And I'll share that story another time. But this aspect of faith, it just seems as though nobody is actually trusting God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, or him, how your perspective is. They don't want to trust. It's as if our society has jaded so many people. What are your thoughts?
You just throw a lot out on the table. Let me see if I can think. I have a few thoughts about that.
Sure.
I do believe that there's been a diminishment of faith that has definitely upended the morality of our society. I'll give you a couple of examples. Democracy was founded on the belief that even when there are no external regulations, people will do the right thing because of inner motivation. In other words, we're not in a totalitarian state. The reality is, if you're looking to foster ethical behavior, there has to be a sense that there's a higher power to whom I'm accountable. The increase in violence and theft, in diminishment of others, and demeaning others, even if they because they disagree with us, is to me a reflection, unfortunately, the fact that people are not cognizant of the notion that every human being is created in God's image, which to me would be the fastest way to get rid of any racism or bigotry, and also would uplift society. When we live in a world where, unfortunately, there are now flash mobs of theft, and people are just deciding what to do, whether they're going to be caught or not, that to me is primarily a result of a person not recognizing that other people have rights, and that ultimately I need to do the right thing even if we're not going to be caught. So that's number one. So I think that's where we need more faith. A second dimension of it is that with faith comes humility. It comes a sense that I can't accomplish everything on my own. I mean, the lack of bipartisanship in our government, the inability for people to really listen to another point of view, to me is also reflects a lack of faith. That there are positive things that other people can say, even if they're of a different party. I think also um, the drive to accumulate, as opposed to give. At the end of the day, we're takers or we're givers.
Mm-hmm.
I said in my community that I hope we live in a world where we don't need any more food drives. What do I mean by that? There's absolutely no reason why everybody who goes shopping every week shouldn't just buy one thing and drop it off in a food box outside the supermarket. That's a faith driven. That means that if I have bounty, God didn't give it to me now because it's all for me.
Mm-hmm.
He entrusted it to me so that I can be his ambassador in the world. So, I mean, I do believe that the world will be a radically different place. I do believe that, you have the separation of church and state to a degree, but I think this desire to push God out of our interactions has come at a cost. And my hope is we can all work together to, reorient people around whatever faith it is, but to know that it's not all about them. It's about being accountable to a higher power, a sense of mission, and also to recognize the face of God in every human being.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's a sad state of affairs when we see, and of course this we were told this before the midterms, for example, using that arena, if you will, that one party was going to go after the other party. I mean, and they're still looking for victims that they can attack and so forth, instead of doing the people's business, instead of making sure that whatever budget is passed, includes this, that, and the other thing that is necessary for the rest of us, the citizens who are paying the bills, mind you.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute. How is this the people's business going after? And then, you have a lot of other things going on where accusations are made. And then the response is not addressing the accusations, if you will, the allegations, I should say, but deflecting. Yeah, I know what you're saying about this person over here, but what about this person and this person and this person? It's like, we're not talking about those people. You want to go after them? Fine. Let's deal with this person over here. What's going on? Why is it that this person is the way they are, and you continue to support them in spite of what looks like pretty ironclad evidence that they've broken the law? We're not going to talk about anybody else but this person. Let's deal with that here right now. Don't deflect. Don't redirect. Stay focused. And let's get through this, move on. And that's the other thing too, is that we can't seem to move on. Everybody wants to stay. It's like, I'm surprised it's 22 years later, and are we still complaining about 9/11? It's 50, 60, 70 years later. Are we still whining and complaining about Pearl Harbor? It's over 100 years. Are we still complaining about the Titanic? And the poor if this is true, the poor craftsmanship and so on. Move on, get over it. But by the same token, I try not to listen to the news. It is not worth it.
You're a good man.
It is not worth it. Now, the irony is that I've been working for 44 years at different news talk and information stations. So I still hear it. But I want to ask you, in regards to outside sources of, shall we call it, influence, that sort of distract us from the goal, if you will. I don't know if you want to call it a goal per se in terms of one's personal legacy, but the outside sources tend to distract us from those kinds of things, everything that I've just mentioned in that regard. If I stay focused on that stuff, when am I going to have time to do interviews? Because I'm sitting around complaining, moaning, and groaning, and playing the victim. Because to me, that's what a complainer is. They are playing the victim.
Well, there's first of all a couple things. I always recommend that everybody has a worry box. I don't know if you've heard about that. A worry box means you should allocate 10 minutes a day, let's say, to worry about everything going on in the world. And then if you've passed that 10 minutes, you just push it off till tomorrow. Because every moment that we spend complaining and worrying is a moment lost to do something positive within the world. And I think that you're right. When a person complains, all they're doing is removing themselves from taking personal responsibility to actually try to choose life, do something positive, and move the world forward. And that I do believe is one of the challenges, because it's very easy. And the government does a disservice when they continue to remind individuals that they're victims. Because all it does is it releases those people from taking ownership over their life, to try to move things forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the end of the day, what separates us from the animals, we're created in divine image with free choice. Moses says at the very end of his life, "Today I give you the choice between life and death, blessing and curse." And then he says, "Choose life. Choose life."
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I was giving counsel to a fellow with a few people, a few kids, about a few weeks ago, and he says, "Rabbi, after all is said and done, give me one word to give me a little bit of motivation as I leave this meeting." And I said to him, "Choose life."
Mm-hmm.
That means when you're interacting with your wife, everything is positive. You're interacting with your kids, you're focused totally on them. You see somebody, you're giving people the benefit of the doubt. You're choosing life. And I think that when we choose life and we take the opportunities to be an ambassador for life and light, the world will be elevated around us. And that's kind of, to me, where our heads need to be. And I say to people, I don't know about you, but I don't have my phone with me when I go to bed. I leave it downstairs, because why in the world do I want to open up my phone as the first thing that goes into my head in the morning? I want to thank God. I want to say some prayers. I want to fortify my soul and my mind so that when I do hear this stuff, it deflects right off me, because I know that I got my head on straight.
It's kind of like this analogy just came to me. I don't know why. I've often said the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. The analogy of a duck, and a duck's wings, his feathers, have this oil on it that deflects, if you will, water.
I heard about this.
Yeah. And of course, if they get caught up in one of these oil slicks, that changes the whole dynamic. But under normal circumstances, there's that oil that they've got on their feathers that allows them to basically stay dry. So that's kind of what you're talking about in that respect. And boy, we need a lot of that metaphorical oil right now, because one of my tasks in service is not to put forth particular perspectives and say I'm right. Mine is to look at a particular situation and see if I can't explain to people how ludicrous that is. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mesh, and I'm not saying that perspective in terms of looking at those kinds of things makes any sense. And a lot of people have helped me to develop that. And this is interesting how I was listening to this one comedian who was talking about the issue of pro-life. And they were going around asking people on the street, so do you think God is pro-life? Oh, yes, God is pro-life. Okay, but what about the Old Testament, where God killed this tribe and that tribe and the other tribe for the Jews, for the Jewish people, for Israel, and so forth? And they stammer. So, well, then God isn't really pro-life. He's You might even say, and this is this guy talking here. Actually, you might even say he's kind of racist because he's only in favor of the Jews. He didn't care about anybody else. And then what about Noah and the ark and what God created the flood and killed everybody off, but Noah's family and all the animals? Is that pro-life? And I mean, this was the kind of mindset this guy was kind of putting out there, saying you need to take a better look. Because I think about that in our modern day and say, what about the people in prison? What about the people on death row? Is the reason for a prison exclusively to punish? Or is there such a thing as rehabilitation? I also know there's recidivism also, but isn't that where, I mean, God forgives. If we genuinely ask for it, he forgives, and maybe will put in our path those things that will help us to change our path, so that we can then begin to live that life of legacy, right?
No, I would say, there's a beautiful statement in the Talmud that says, and it's based on a verse that says that we hope that the sinners stop sinning, but not that we're looking to destroy the sinner. In other words, we believe that everybody's created with a pure soul.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody, of course, is effectuating evil, it has to be either they have to abandon what they're doing, or if they're not going to abandon what they're doing, then they can't exist. You take the Nazis, for example. I mean, there are evil people that exist.
Sure.
At the same time, the goal is for people to stop doing what they're doing and obviously, reflect a life that is truly a divine life. And, that's a very important message. I mean, even with, look, you mentioned with Judaism, of course, it's not the notion of chosenness. By the way, Judaism believes that every human being has an opportunity of a share in the world to come. Chosenness doesn't mean better than; it just means a unique mission, guided by the 613 principles of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, every human being is created in God's image, and every human being is tasked with leading a life that is a godly life. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the 7 Noahides laws, which are considered, leading an ethical life, which is, whether it's morally, whether it's in terms of setting up a just judicial system, and that's the overall goal that we're trying to inspire people to. And the notion of the question in the book that I had is, what will they say about you when you're gone? Somebody said, I don't really care. They said that to me. I said, that's not the point. The point is that most people, when they have either their own brush with mortality, somebody's sitting in the hospital, I've seen it, or somebody loses a loved one, it's literally a moment when there is an opportunity for true self-reflection about removing ego and thinking about what are the kind of people they really want to be.
Mm.
The tragedy sometimes is that lasts for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then people are distracted. So my goal is to help people live with that inspiration on a regular basis, so that we're not just allowing the time to go, but we're actually making sure that every day counts to build that legacy, to make an impact on the world around us.
And then, of course, there are a lot of people who are living outside of some of these institutions, the jails and prisons and so forth, who are just as much in prison because they have not learned that there are other choices. And I believe that's the term. They have not learned. They haven't been taught that there are other ways of living. And it may be due to a lack of formal education. It may be due to the fact that they have been in some of these programs that perpetuate, I mean, for generations have perpetuated the attitude that the government is going to take care of me and so forth. And it's like, well, see, I myself personally, when I was in my 20s, early 20s, after I got out of high school, I was on Social Security for a short time. I was grateful for it. And I got off it and I got to work and I started doing what I'm doing now. I am now headed towards the other end of that Social Security thing, where I'll be getting a few dollars here and there, and then I paid into that fund, so there you go. But it seems to me that we need to, and maybe the word educate is not the correct word, but we need to open people's eyes who have only felt that they've had one choice or maybe two, that there are more choices than you can shake a stick at, that you have opportunities that a lot of people didn't have who came before you. But if they aren't shown that they have them, how are they going to choose them?
Well, I think that's also the value of big brother, big sister, of having role models. And unfortunately, look, I'm blessed, and I felt my parents were just such, and God willing, and my father should live me well, but I grew up in a home where I had the blessing of having role models, and not everybody does. But it's important, you look back on people's lives and you ask them, who are the one or two people that came into your life that really was influential in helping you become who you are? And maybe somebody at work that put their arm around your shoulder, and maybe somebody who said, I'm going to take an interest in this young kid and help him or her. And I think that, we have to be on the lookout, which to me is also a way that we create legacy. Who maybe is in our neighborhood, in our orbit, that could use a little bit of counsel or wisdom or a little extra push, because not everybody is blessed with the sort of role models that might inspire them to lead that sort of life.
Yeah, it's like I was talking about my father earlier, and I have to tell you that two things. Number one, there are thousands of people that are responsible for me being where I am right now talking with you. If it hadn't been for them, I would not be here right now. So it goes without saying, but it needs to be said that nobody does what they do. Nobody leaves a legacy without others in their lives. And that's, of course, the reason why I know that my parents, at least my father, I guess, as I said before, he knows now that he left one heck of a fantastic legacy. If I were to go down the path of my four sisters and my brother, they've done the same thing. They've helped other people along the way, who have helped other people along the way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just I don't want to say a snowball effect, but it's sort of like the dominoes, being tipped. I love watching those videos too, by the way. Those are fascinating. We're talking with Rabbi Daniel Cohen, and the book that he has written is, of course, What Will They Say About You When You Are Gone? And I first of all, appreciate the kind words earlier in the program, but by the same token, there's no guarantee. And I don't do what I do for necessarily that purpose. In other words, it's not necessarily my intent. Well, that's a question I have for you. Is that something that we need to have a special focused intent on in terms of leaving a legacy, whether it be writing a book or doing interviews or building buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
No, I mean, I don't think that we should be thinking about, what's my legacy. Again, I use this as a trigger to think about the fact that we all have this kind of unique potential every day to make a difference in the world around us. And one of the strategies that they speak about is, everybody has what I call, you're familiar with the term mitzvah? You know what a mitzvah is? A mitzvah is mitzvah is a commandment or kind deed. I said, every human being has what I call a mobile mitzvah hotspot. A mobile mitzvah hotspot. A hotspot on your phone means that, of course, if somebody comes into that orbit, they can plug into the Wi-Fi or whatever it is. There's a very powerful mystical idea that if somebody comes into my radar, in my orbit, be that at the supermarket, be it in my home, be it on the street, there's an opportunity for me to create an eternal memory. There's an opportunity for me to uplift the person that is right in front of me. And to me, it's not an issue of thinking about what will they say about you. It's an issue of being mindful that in every moment I can find meaning. And then in the fleeting moments of time, I can bring a little bit of heaven down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
That awareness that no encounter is random, and that I have this opportunity to reveal some hidden spark in a conversation in the world is truly the way to lead a life of legacy. It's about being fully present. It reminds me, there's a great scene with Tom Hanks in the movie about Mr. Rogers, where there's the reporter calls him up on the phone, and Mr. Rogers says to the reporter, "Do you know what I'm thinking about right now?" And the reporter says, "I don't know what you're thinking about now." So Mr. Rogers says, "The only person in the world I'm thinking about right now is you. And I am fully present with you right now." And that's the way you create a memory. That's the way you create a legacy. Too often, our minds and bodies and souls are not aligned, and we get nothing done, and we don't make a difference. And people say, "He didn't really hear what I said, and he didn't even notice that I was there." But one smile from across the room, one door opening for somebody in that moment, that's maybe what they needed. I'll just share one other story. I know you like stories, but a congregant of mine recovered from cancer, thank God, at Sloan Kettering, which is a great institution in New York City, Sloan Kettering Memorial Cancer Center. And I said to him, I said, "Tell me what you loved about that place. What did you like?" And he said to me, "I'll never forget the doorman. As I was leaving the hospital, the doorman said to me two things: I'm praying for you, and I hope I never see you again." And that was 10 seconds of the doorman. But I can imagine, how much legacy that doorman has because of those little interactions where he gives somebody a little bit of hope as they're leaving, and a kind word. We all can do that.
Yeah, it's incredible how little it takes. It does not
Yes, that
take
is true.
much. And to me, that's rather astounding, that it takes so little to make a difference in someone's life. We're talking with Rabbi Daniel Cohen. We're talking about his latest work, and that is, What Will They Say About You When You Are Gone? It is creating a life of legacy, and just being who you are is so important as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. One of the things that we are talking about here with Rabbi Cohen is this aspect of leaving a legacy, and learning who you are. I mean, really, who you are, really, deep down inside, and who you are. You have a title of rabbi, certainly with the education to back it up, certainly. But that isn't really who Daniel Cohen is it?
You know what? Whether rabbi, lawyer, that's what we do. That's not who we are. What I try to be is somebody who, walks in the ways of God, who shares kind words with people, who leads a life of authenticity, good father, a person who really just tries to emulate a God. I think about it, somebody who takes the life that God has given me and shares that as often as I can. And I think you're right. People sometimes confuse their roles with their souls.
Mm.
Your roles with your souls. You're an accountant. That's not who you are. That's what you do. And the problem is that's why people have so many struggles when they retire. That's why Michael Jordan re-retired, and re-retired because his life was defined by basketball. But we have to nurture who we really are. That's just a tool, what we do. But who we are hopefully people that emulate God's attributes in the life that we lead.
Mm. I was listening to, this is sort of a sidebar thing. I was listening to George Carlin, and he was comparing Catholicism to Judaism and the paradox that he sees. And he says, in the Catholic Church, men are supposed to take their hats off, and women can leave their hats on. But in Judaism, men are supposed to put their hats on. In this case, it's a yarmulke, and women are supposed to make sure they take their hats off. It's so confusing. And I thought, okay, may I ask, you're wearing a yarmulke, correct?
I am.
What
Yes.
is the meaning of the yarmulke in this context, as far as, because I am wanting to learn more about I've told people many times, because of what I've learned thus far, that if I was going to convert to anything, it would be Judaism, only because I love the mysticism, especially. But there's also that ritual, the ceremony, the mitzvahs, and so forth, the bat and bar mitzvahs, and also the weekly. Is it a Seder weekly?
It's a weekly Shabbat. A
Shabbat.
weekly Sabbath. Yeah. So it's interesting. The word yarmulke is actually two words combined. Which means Yare Malka, which is fear of God or God's awe. So the notion of having the yarmulke is a reminder that God is above me always. We believe, by the way, it says this in the book of Genesis, that women have a deeper spiritual intuition. Women are more spiritually sensitive. That's why, and they're just more mature. A young girl becomes a bat mitzvah at 12. A boy needs an extra year of maturation. Boy takes 13. We're just more base. So a woman doesn't have the same commandments, not because she is inferior, but rather because she doesn't need all these reminders. So that's why I wear a yarmulke, but my 6 daughters, they don't wear it. Doesn't mean they're not devout. They're very devout, but they don't need these extra reminders.
I'm curious too. The holy book, if you will, that you folks, that the Jews, Judaism uses, is not, quote unquote, the Bible. It is, am I correct, the Torah, which is the Old Testament?
Well, yeah, it's the Old Testament. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses, the books of the prophets, the books of the scriptures, and it ends with the book of Malachi. We also believe the Torah is reflected in the works of the Talmud, which is the oral tradition that was committed to writing a couple thousand years ago. But primarily, the main book is the first 5 books we believe is divine, and Moses just wrote it down. But what makes it eternal, makes the 5 books of Moses, we believe, are literally an eternal guide for every generation to lead a divine life.
Is there anything in the New Testament that is utilized?
I mean, I have a radio show with a reverend, so he quotes the New Testament all the time. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in there. There's clearly wisdom, that we draw on. Obviously there's certain things we disagree on, but it's a friendly disagreement because Christianity is a different faith than Judaism. But Judaism believes very strongly, whether it's in Islamic faith or Christian faith, or doesn't mean there isn't wisdom in other faiths that we can draw upon as well.
It's truly the focal point of most of the, I like to refer to them as the major philosophies on the planet, that there is a creator, there is a God who brought all of us into being and is going to take care of us. But it's kind of hard for the creator to take care of us if we're not living the kind of life that, and we're not talking about, setting down a bunch of rules here in terms of how you should live your life. But listening, one of the things we promote on this program is going within and listening to that still small voice. And to me, that's a big key,
exactly
isn't it?
That's a big key. That's the primary issue, is that people aren't listening to the voice inside of them. They're listening to other people's voices. They're listening what society says they should be listening to. But I believe that if we can tune out a lot of the static and the outside noise and truly tap into that inner voice inside of us, we will all lead better lives.
Oh, yeah.
Lives of legacy. Yep.
Rabbi Daniel Cohen is my guest. RabbiDanielCohen.com, correct? Is your website?
RabbiDanielCohen.com, correct. Thank you.
The book is entitled, What Will They Say About You When You Are Gone? Creating a Life of Legacy. I know that my father, when he passed at the age of 91, he definitely did leave one incredible legacy. I often have told people over the years, number one, that if somebody has been following me for those 44 years that I've been doing this and taking notes, they could write my unauthorized biography. And the other aspect of it is that my father made a huge impact on me with many of what I like to call his wise sayings. He never liked it when I would refer to him as a wise man. Didn't like that at all. But basically, one of them was find a job that you love to do because you're going to be doing it for a long time. Don't get stuck like me. Well, that was before he went to college and went to junior college and got his computer programming degree. And this was back in the 70s when they had fanfold paper and punch cards. So
Got it.
let me ask you before we wrap things up about, you've talked a little bit earlier about how you became a rabbi. Was there a particular impetus that took you down this road to say, you know what, I need to focus a writing of my own on this subject of legacy? Was there some catalytic moment that said, I got to do this?
You mean becoming a rabbi?
No. Writing the book about legacy.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, which was kind of, getting to the same age as my mom when she lost her life suddenly, kind of created this inner awakening in me to be more intentional about writing about it, about leading my best life. So, and I keep her front and center all the time. I feel her presence every day.
Well, that's very cool. I feel the same way about my father. That's one of the neat things about that is, even though, yes, I wish my father were still here with us in body, his was starting to break down a little bit. So he's free of that and he can see and hear perfectly. And now he can walk without falling down.
There you go.
But now, instead of him being just in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where my parents and sisters live, he's everywhere. And that's what's so cool is I talk to him a lot. And someone told me, in terms of getting any messages from him, they tell me you have to learn to listen faster, because as your questions are being uttered, either aloud or in your head, he's already given you the answer.
Right.
That's
true.
And that is so fascinating. Is there a particular school of thought in regards to, do we want to call it the afterlife? Do we call it heaven? Do we call it another dimension?
We call it, there's something called the afterlife. Look, at the end of the day, the soul is eternal. And just because the body has, separated from the soul doesn't mean that there isn't some eternality that exists as well. And that's kind of the afterlife.
Have you ever heard of the concept of there's a practice by a Dr. Newton called life between lives?
No, I haven't.
It's where you go into through hypnosis, and it's conscious. You are completely 100% aware, because I've been through it myself, where they take you back to your previous life. And again, I don't know if Judaism teaches about reincarnation or not, but
we do.
Yeah, but it takes you back to your previous life right before your passing, and through your passing into that realm between that life and the life that you're living today. And it's really fascinating that information that they've gotten from individuals, independent and separately from one another.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the reality is this all these interconnections. We believe that one candle can light many flames, and there definitely is an interconnection between different souls.
It's also said too, I've heard this, that everybody that you associate with throughout your life is sort of a member of what they refer to as your cluster, and that you've gone through many lives, like you and I. We've gone through many lives together, but as different individuals, different roles, and so forth and so on. It's, to me, rather fascinating. And I definitely want to learn more. And I thank you for sharing with us the information that you have, the knowledge in regards to certain little aspects of Judaism, because I think that—
My pleasure.
It's one of the problems we have is that people, we should have, in school, when they're teaching us about history, world history, They should be teaching us
Yeah.
about the faiths that exist. It's not a question of trying to convert anybody. It's a question of learning about them and understanding them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
100%.
I
Well,
have three final
anytime.
questions. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, maybe we'll have you on here for a class. I'd love to do that. That'd be a lot of fun. I have three final questions for you that I ask all of my guests. But before I do, I mentioned, folks, that I was going to give you the preliminaries. Well, I'm going to give them to you now before we wrap things up. You are listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we are streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com, where our podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations, too numerous to mention here. And we are on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. In either case, I hope that you'll click notifications so that when I do post a new conversation, you'll be aware of it and you can go and listen to that conversation, such as this one that we've been having here with Rabbi Daniel Cohen. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we would be so gratefully appreciative. We do have a PayPal account, and it is there for your security as well as ours. When you go there, you will put in my email address. That's to whom to send the support to. It's richard@richarddugan.com, richard@richarddugan.com. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you would spend some time during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, going within and listening to, as a rabbi has mentioned, listening to that still small voice. It'll only steer you right. Okay. And I don't mean making right turns all the time. Two rights don't make a left, but they'll get you off the freeway.
Yeah, exactly.
With all of that said, the final three questions are: number one, who is Daniel Cohen?
A spark of the divine.
What is your life's purpose?
To shower the world with kindness without expectation of anything in return. To take God's light and life that he has given me and to be God's ambassador in the world.
And finally, what was your best day?
This moment right now with you.
Well, Rabbi Daniel Cohen, thank you so much. This was a joy. I hope we can get together again. Congratulations on your impending, is it great or just grandfatherhood?
A grandfather. Thank you.
All right. And we wish good health and happiness to that new arrival. And thank you so much for being a part of our program.
You too. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you, my friend.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. And Dad, be happy, because I am.